From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide, in Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, the biggest reveals from Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, including updates to FaceTime, iMessage, Photos, the digital wallet, Maps, and more. Plus, the first new drug for Alzheimer's approved in 2 decades, a landmark decision from the FDA for Biogen. We'll get reaction, plus the results of a massive COVID-19 study by 23andMe, finding the loss of taste and smell is more common among women and younger patients. I'll speak to CEO Anne Wojcicki later this hour. And Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos himself will blast into space next month when his company, Blue Origin, launches its first mission with human passengers. We'll have all the details, including his brother, Mark, who will join him as wingman in flight. All those stories in a moment, but first, surging Biogen shares driving the tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 higher. Our Ed Ludlow has the full picture. Ed, walk us through the day.
Yeah, it's been a kind of choppy day. 2 topics are front of mind for investors. The first being inflation and what that means for monetary policy, but also a global minimum corporate tax that's being debated by the G7. That really weighed on equities. You can see the S&P 500, the main gauge of equities, down marginally just by 0.1%. And earlier in Monday, tech shares had been severely impacted because those are the most profitable companies, and the framework of that agreement targets tech companies. But we turned the corner, as you say, the tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 closing up 0.2%, the Biogen surge really boosting that index. Weakness in Bitcoin as well. You can see we're up just marginally in the latest session, but down below $35,000, and that weighed on the Bloomberg Galaxy crypto index, down by 1.8% on Monday. Come with me into my Bloomberg terminal. Yes, we've seen some choppy trading when it comes to Bitcoin. Yes, we've seen price swings. But if you look at the right-hand side of your screen, the trading is within a much more narrow range. The prices that we see in any given session are not stretched between 2 extremes like we saw earlier in the month of May. You can see in those big spikes. Back in the equity market, that was really what the story was, though, was inflation and concerns about this minimum global corporate tax. The NASDAQ 100 up 0.2%. If you come back to me in the studio, that was a turnaround late Monday, and the story behind it, Biogen, up 38%, at one point up 64% after the FDA approved a somewhat controversial but landmark drug for curing Alzheimer's disease. And that really boosted other equities. Also turning the corner, Tesla, up 1%. It had been down earlier on Monday's session, same kind of concerns with that global corporate tax. But then a tweet from the main account saying the Plaid event is on Thursday. There had been concerns that the company had cancelled the long-range model of that vehicle that it's going to deliver to customers starting Thursday. And then Apple, treading water, basically flat, not too many market moves when it came to WWDC, but I know you're going to go through some of the big announcements. I just want to look at these 2 stocks year to date. Tesla and Apple have really underperformed that basket of big cap tech stocks, the New York FANG index. Why? What with all the excitement, Emily?
Let's find out. Ed Ludlow, thanks so much for that roundup. I want to stick with Apple now. Not unusual to not see big market moves on a WWDC day, as we didn't see today. The iPhone maker, though, kicking off its second all-virtual annual Worldwide Developers Conference. Our Bloomberg Tech reporter, Mark Gurman, who covers Apple, has all the details for us. So, Mark, talk to us about the most significant announcements from today.
I think the 2 big significant things today we saw were around FaceTime and were around notifications. Apple gave FaceTime the biggest update it's ever given the service since it launched in 2010 by Steve Jobs with the iPhone 4. This is going straight after Zoom. They're adding scheduled FaceTime calls, they're adding improved video and audio quality, and a new feature that allows you to start a FaceTime call and then send a link to it to another user, just like you do with Zoom. And interestingly, it will work on the web on both Android and Windows. So slightly opening up FaceTime a bit. Not all the way, you're not getting native FaceTime apps on Android and Windows, but you're being able to use it on the web. I do want to note that the notification system is revamped for the most part. There are new features for separating notifications during do not disturb time, during work time, during personal time. I think that's going to be very interesting. Overall, though, more of a muted event, lots of small things across the systems rather than anything that's a real grand slam, a major revolutionary change.
And of course, Mark, this event was happening against a backdrop. We're still waiting for the decision on the big Apple Epic verdict from the judge. No big sort of wholesale changes to the App Store or rules today. I know we didn't expect those, but I did notice that Apple really focused on developers at the top with some light ideas from a range of developers about a cool opening for WWDC. I chuckled at some of their ideas. Did you notice anything different about the show, given that this is Apple's opportunity to make the case to developers that Apple is where they should be spending their time?
Yeah, there was nothing other than a statistic, $230 billion paid out to developers since 2008. That's a stat they pretty much give at every WWDC with the updated number, 600 million weekly visitors to the App Store. So really nothing in light of the ongoing issues with developers and Epic. But here's the thing, Emily, developers don't have an alternative, right? You're not going to be a successful developer if you're only focused on Android. And so if you want to be a successful developer, you have to hit iOS because you have 1 billion plus users there. So developers could be upset with Apple all they want, but if they want to continue to be software developers for mobile devices, well, they're going to have to play ball.
Well, let's talk about employees who might be upset with Apple. Last week, you got the very long memo that Tim Cook sent to employees detailing their return to work plans, asking for employees to be back in the office Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. The company has now gotten pushback through a petition from some employees that was leaked to The Verge, employees saying that they feel unheard, that some of their colleagues have quit because Apple isn't being flexible enough. What's your take on this?
My take is when you have 30,000 plus employees in Silicon Valley and over 160,000 employees globally, you can't make everyone happy. And I believe that letter is signed by about 80 employees, so a very small number. I think that the 3-day in-office and 2-day remote change for Apple, this hybrid remote work setup, is incredibly unique. And in a way, it's sort of shocking to me. I was fully expecting Apple to require employees to go back 5 days a week. That is the culture of Apple from the beginning, and I didn't think that 1 year away would necessarily change that, but clearly the pandemic has had that big of an impact on a company like Apple. So I think that 2 days a week remote gesture is a significant one. What it does not address, and an issue I think is going to, go ahead.
Well, I agree with you, Mark. I think there was more flexibility in there than I expected from a company like Apple.
Yeah, absolutely. What this does not address, and I think this is actually going to be the bigger issue long term, is that people don't necessarily want to live in Silicon Valley as much as they used to. So they really need to address the idea of people working in other cities as well. And I think they've been doing that by opening up more and more offices in more places across the world.
Well, certainly a huge issue that companies large and small are dealing with. Mark Gurman, thanks so much for your thoughts there. We'll continue to watch your reporting on this. Meantime, Apple is just one of the major U.S.-based tech companies facing a turning tide as world governments work to change global taxation rules and cross-border profits. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen reiterated the G7's tax commitments earlier.
The G7 has taken significant steps this weekend to end the existing harmful dynamic, making commitments today that provide tremendous momentum towards achieving a robust global minimum tax at a rate of at least 15%.
With more on how the G7 commitments could impact the tech sector, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Nico Grant, who's been covering this story. So give us the big picture takeaway here, Nico. This is a very complicated, complex issue, and big U.S. tech companies have, in fact, dodged a lot of taxes as a result of some policies, which is what these governments are trying to change.
Yes. I mean, over a period of 30 years, major multinational corporations have been paying a shrinking percentage of taxes. And last year, two companies, in particular among the big tech firms, Facebook and Amazon, paid below 15%. And that was also below average among its peers. And so the idea is for governments to sort of stop bickering with one another about taxes, and sometimes countries in Europe have imposed digital services taxes against American tech companies in order to get some of that revenue, and then the U.S. government has protested or had tit-for-tat tariffs. The idea is to get all of the governments on the same page so that no matter where a tech company is operating around the world, its profits are being taxed at, if not the same rate, then at least it has the floor of at least 15%, judging that as, no company of this size and of this wealth and this profitable should pay less than 15% in taxes.
So how would this agreement impact big companies like Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft?
So they may have to pay taxes in different places now. And so there is going to be a push. A lot of this still needs to be worked out, as you mentioned, but there's going to be a push that companies pay taxes where their customers are, so where they're making money rather than where their headquarters are or where they may be storing intellectual property and those types of things. And so for some of these companies, I mean, Apple is a bit different because it sells so much hardware, but particularly for software companies and advertising-based companies like Facebook and Alphabet, it means that, a lot of the countries, including France and the UK, that imposed digital services taxes because they felt they weren't getting enough money from them, will be getting money that is commensurate with the amount of profits that these companies generate within their borders. But there still is a lot of work that needs to be done on how to allocate around the world so that these profits aren't double taxed or triple taxed. And so next, this is going to go to the G20, and after that to the full OECD with 140 countries, each with their own agendas.
So a lot still needs to be worked out there, but thanks for breaking it down for us. Nico Grant, our Bloomberg Tech reporter, on very, very important topic of big tech corporate taxes worldwide. More on big tech now. Google has agreed to overhaul its global ad business in a landmark antitrust deal. An investigation by France's antitrust agency found Google used its dominance to favor its own online ad marketplace, hurting rival publishers. It also fined the search giant $268 million. Google has pledged to improve its ad manager service for third parties. All right, coming up, Visa has teamed up with one of the top banks in the U.S., and that is Goldman Sachs. In an exclusive interview, I'll speak with Visa Chief Financial Officer Vasant Prabhu on the new deal, Visa's crypto efforts, and much, much more. And later, Jeff Bezos is taking a trip to space, and he's bringing along his brother. We're going to take a look at more details surrounding the duo's expedition on Blue Origin's first liftoff, carrying human passengers. This is Bloomberg. The U.S. has recovered most of the $4.4 million paid in cryptocurrency ransom to the hackers behind the Colonial Pipeline attack. The attack back in May resulted in the temporary halt of fuel supplies across the U.S. East Coast. Colonial Pipeline ended up paying Russian-linked cybercrime group The Dark Side in order to restore operations.
Today, the FBI successfully seized criminal proceeds from a Bitcoin wallet that DarkSide ransomware actors used to collect a cyber ransom payment from a victim.
That was FBI Director Paul Abate there. We're going to continue to bring you updates on that developing story. Meantime, I want to take you to an interview we did last week with the chair and CEO of Snowflake, Frank Slootman, that caused a lot of discussion through the weekend. Take a listen to a clip from that interview last Thursday.
We're actually highly sympathetic to diversity, but we just don't want that to override merit, because I start doing that, I start compromising the company's mission, literally. And obviously that's not what our employees want from me, because they're there for a reason as well. I will tell you from my own experience talking to many CEOs, all the names that you know privately, we are of the same mind. It's just publicly they find it difficult to be that way.
Or do they? Again, that was Snowflake CEO Frank Slootman in an interview right here on Bloomberg Technology last week, implying that diversity should be secondary to merit when it comes to hiring decisions. Since then, he has faced massive backlash from other CEOs to venture capitalists across Silicon Valley. Twilio CEO Jeff Lawson tweeting, "I disagree with this publicly and privately. Building a diverse company where every talented person, regardless of background, can contribute and be successful is not a distraction. It's a key job of a CEO." Ellen Pao, CEO of Project Include, pointed out that employees, in fact, do care about a diverse workforce, tweeting that the vast majority of job seekers and new grads think it's very important. And the research bears this out. McKinsey has found that companies with diverse leadership are more likely to outperform their peers on profitability. Slootman today issued a statement apologizing for his remarks and promising a comprehensive diversity review at Snowflake, saying, "I want to personally apologize to anyone who may have been hurt or offended by my comments. The reality is corporate leaders like myself and companies like Snowflake must fight daily to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion help lead our thinking and actions." I've invited Slootman back in 6 months to talk about some concrete results of that comprehensive diversity review. Up next, Visa teams up with Goldman Sachs. In an exclusive interview, I'm going to speak with the CFO of Visa about the new deal, Visa's crypto efforts, and much more. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Everyone knows Visa for its logo on billions of cards used by consumers around the world. The credit card giant is now working with Goldman Sachs as the bank looks to roll out its new transaction banking arm. Joining me now in an exclusive interview, Visa CFO Vasant Prabhu. Vasant, good to have you back here on the show. You're working with Goldman on a debit card as well, and I'm curious what is so important to Visa about getting into these kinds of payments, given how ubiquitous you are when it comes to credit cards. Why get into these new kinds of businesses?
Emily, it's great to see you again, and I'm sorry we've had these connectivity problems. Thanks for having me. I'm just going to be on the phone, I guess. Coming back to your question, so as you know, cross-border payments have always been difficult with a lot of friction attached to them. And Visa has done a lot over the years to make cross-border payments easy in the consumer world, when you travel, for example, or for e-commerce. But for businesses, it's difficult. Depending on what where you're trying to get your money, how much you're trying to send, you might have to work with multiple platforms. There are questions about security, cost, certainty, what kind of exchange rates we can solve all that. With a single connection, we can get anywhere it needs to go, whether it's a large payment to a supplier you're making or a lot of small payments you're making to entities anywhere. And we can do that. We have two platforms that we've built over the years. One is B2B Connect. That is a blockchain-based platform. that can move money anywhere in the world for various transactions that are data-rich. And then there's Visa Payout Service, which leverages our Earthport platform along with our own platform to get high-velocity, smaller payments anywhere in the world by leveraging not only our network, but a whole range of networks, along with, which we call our network of network strategy. So from a Goldman standpoint, it significantly simplifies the process. It's a single point of connection for any kind of payment, anywhere in any currency, going to a bank account or a debit card or a credit card. And that's what makes it attractive. We are doing this because to take the friction out of B2B cross-border payments, which we see as a $10 trillion volume.
Vasant, we're still having a little trouble hearing you, but I'm going to try for one more here. While I have you, I'd love to ask about your crypto efforts because you're taking on more crypto features, not just accepting cryptocurrency payments, but also settling those payments yourself. What kind of volume are you seeing there? And do you believe that people are using their credit cards to buy cryptocurrency?
Most of cryptocurrency purchases tend to be on debit rather than credit. There is certainly volume because we do enable people to buy cryptocurrencies using our credentials, debit or credit. There's certainly been, as you know, a significant amount of increased interest in buying currencies. But we do a lot more than that. We've been working with 50 of the major wallets and funds to enable people not only to move currency from fiat to crypto, but then use their cryptocurrencies to buy things at merchants that accept cryptocurrencies. We're also recently announced that we will settle USDC as the first one the stable coins will settle. So this goes well beyond just helping people buy cryptocurrencies. It's a broad, comprehensive approach to enabling payments to cryptocurrency and taking the friction out of it.
All right. We'll appreciate that update. Vasant, I'm going to let you go. We're having a little trouble hearing you. But Visa CFO Vasant Prabhu, thanks so much for giving us an update on your crypto efforts as well as that new partnership with Goldman Sachs. All right. Coming up, 23andMe is out with a new and eye-opening finding that a person's age and gender can influence the likelihood of them losing their sense of taste and smell. Of course, one of the major symptoms of COVID-19. CEO Anne Wojcicki joins us next to talk about that report. And the Bezos brothers are teaming up for a trip into space. When can we expect the launch? And who is Mark Bezos? All of that coming up. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. A breakthrough for the pharmaceutical company Biogen. The FDA cleared its Alzheimer's therapy in a landmark decision that could dramatically change treatment of the debilitating brain condition. The CEO of Biogen joined Bloomberg earlier after the decision was announced.
Down the road, there might be additional hypotheses, but this will take many years before we can see the scientific proof. And as I was just saying, today you have 3 compounds with similar activity, and we are the first one in the market. In a few years, there will be others, and we invite them because the market is so large.
All right, let's see how this played out in the markets today. A lot of movement. Our Kriti Gupta joins us now with more. Kriti, how did this impact shares today?
A 38% jump in Biogen shares alone. You can see it in the spike in this chart right behind me. Not just helping those shares, but helping the entire NASDAQ Biotech Index gain by the most since November 4th, the day after the election, when tech as a whole was rallying as part of that defensive trade. So a really good day for Biogen, an even better day for biotech shares broadly. And speaking of biotech, let's just take a look at those vaccine makers really quickly, because Moderna had some pretty interesting news, trying to get approval for its vaccine candidate for children in the EU and Canada. So those shares spiking, I believe, 7%, almost 7%. And of course, Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson not doing so well in reaction to that news. And as we talk about vaccines, we expect that reopening trade to be in full swing. So let's just take a look at a proxy of that reopening trade. Norwegian Cruise Lines, you can really see on this chart, it hasn't made that full progress yet. Today, those shares were up 3% on the news that they are starting to do additional voyage planning, starting to get back into the norm. Those shares, though, not back to pre-pandemic levels. Emily, we'll just have to wait and see when we can not only take a cruise, but when we can actually see that effect in those shares.
All right, Kriti, thanks so much for the roundup there. Meantime, turning to 23andMe, following its groundbreaking research on the link between blood types and susceptibility to COVID-19, 23andMe has found another genetic variant associated with the loss of taste and smell among infected patients. Here to talk about that discovery, Anne Wojcicki, CEO of 23andMe. And Anne, this is so fascinating because the loss of taste and smell has been one of the most perplexing symptoms of COVID-19. Talk to us about exactly what you found.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And again, I'm really grateful to our customers because this is something where we asked our customers to participate in research, over a year ago. And we have over 80,000 customers who have had COVID and over 1 million people who have participated in the survey. And we were able to first find that blood type was associated with, susceptibility and severity. And it's been really confusing to understand what exactly is happening with this loss of smell. But what we did find is that there's a genetic variant that does look like if you have this variant, you are 11.5 times more likely to actually lose your sense of smell if you have COVID. And it is between 2 genes associated with, the ability to smell with olfactory. So it's a really important clue in being able to start to understand the biology of the disease. So that's why we're really excited about it. And it's the first time we're finding something.
Basically, you found that younger people are more likely to lose their sense of taste and smell. Also, women more likely to lose their sense of taste and smell if they get COVID. I mean, is there more that you could potentially unearth here? Could genetics impact the severity of the disease, for example?
Well, I think that's the beauty of research is that you're constantly asking questions and you're constantly learning. So the thing that we found right now is a really important first clue. And that is that there is a genetic association with why some people are more likely to lose their sense of smell. So that is a first clue. There was not more associated that we found yet with the women and with the age. While we see that with loss of smell, occurring in different populations, we don't yet have a genetic reason why those populations are having more susceptibility. What we do find is about 1/3 of Americans do have this genetic variant that would make them more likely to lose, their sense of smell if they had COVID. So it's the first in a puzzle. Like the beauty again of research is it's a complicated puzzle. So we'll keep discovering. And I think that's also one of the reasons why 23andMe keeps the research going and keeps engaging our customers because there's more to be found.
So what other puzzle pieces are you looking at? What other possible genetic links to COVID are you researching?
Well, I think personally, the thing that's most interesting is that, on severity. It's one of the reasons why we had announced, back almost a year ago that we were giving away free kits for anybody who had been hospitalized with COVID, because you have some of these, extreme stories of people who, are in hospital for, or have the ultimate consequence of death, so that they have the extreme response with COVID. I think that's one area that we are still looking at. Second is we are starting to look at long COVID. So we all hear about these issues as people get COVID, but then they have, months and months or years of symptoms still. So we are now starting to look at that as well. So one thing that we will be doing in the coming months is actually starting to update also our COVID calculator. We did put this out for free to individuals, our COVID calculator. So that is something that we'll continue to update as we make more discoveries.
Meantime, the FDA has approved this landmark Alzheimer drug by Biogen, the first new drug in decades. I'm curious what your reaction is to this and what the implications are for 23andMe. I know that you were looking into late onset Alzheimer's and genetic links there?
Well, I think one thing that's really a passion for me is always looking at why some people respond to medications in one way or, positively, or why they do not respond. So this is a medication I have not looked at it in detail, but I would love to see, is there a genetic basis for response, why some people might do better and some people might not. So I think that is a lot of the future of all therapeutics, is that you really will start to stratify people with conditions into knowing who's most likely to respond and who is not as likely to respond.
Meantime, when it comes to COVID, we are in this sort of messy middle time. For example, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is saying that schools, you don't have to wear masks in schools. At the same time, there's new research from Johns Hopkins saying that adolescents get, very severe cases of COVID. Are you at all concerned about the sort of mixed messages in this messy middle time when we don't know all of the science?
It's a good question, Emily. And I do have this luxury of living with my sister, who's an epidemiologist. So we spend a fair amount of time thinking about this. I personally am always of the mindset that caution makes sense. So that there's not necessarily, we try to use reasonable caution. So, we are more social these days. My kids are back in school. So, we do see people, we go into town, but at the same time, anytime I'm in an indoor place, I am wearing a mask. And I think that I personally feel like there's not necessarily the downside of being reasonably cautious at the same time continuing to do things that make people feel healthy, like being outside and interacting with others. So I do think that there is a reasonable, it's reasonable to keep being cautious and eyes wide open, at the same time take advantage of the warm weather and be outside.
Now, we're all waiting for the merger between 23andMe and the Virgin Atlantic SPAC. I know you can't talk about the details, but I know there's a shareholder vote happening this week. Since you can't talk about the details, what can you tell us about your outlook, the big vision for 23andMe, knowing that you are finding more timely and significant links between genetics and disease?
Emily, I'm so excited about the potential because it's some of the things we've talked about before, everything that's happened with COVID and people feeling comfortable with healthcare online. The potential for data to transform healthcare is huge. And I remember so well in the late 90s when I was sitting on the investment side and I was looking at the internet being built. And you saw like people starting to come together online for the first time and how data was changing everything. And I said it's like watching a desert, become Las Vegas. And that's what's happening right now in healthcare, thanks to data. And when I think about what 23andMe really has, we have this unbelievable connection with our customer. And we have spent 15 years now building out a partnership and trust and engaging them with genetic information, having them take surveys, being able to do research like COVID, like the opioid use study that we did last week as well, the depression study, like all these research studies that come out, giving them back to customers and being able to really engage people in their health. So I'm really enthused about the potential. For me, this is a long-term journey as to where is data going to go with transforming all of healthcare. And I say all the time, what I am most excited about is really being able to use data to know how to live best so I can live best, longest. So I want to be healthy at 100. And I do think that on our drug discovery side, 23andMe is using human genetic data to see if we can develop drugs faster and better. So you talk about, Biogen and their Alzheimer's therapy, huge achievement. I want to be able to make the entire drug discovery process more efficient and faster so that more people are benefiting from the human genome.
All right, Anne, thanks for painting the big picture for us. We'll be watching for your SPAC potentially coming soon. Thanks so much for joining us, 23andMe CEO Anne Wojcicki. Always good to have you. All right, coming up, the rise of 15-minute cities, a new concept driven by the trend of remote work. IWG CEO Mark Dixon joins us next to talk about what it is and how it might not be a solution for every city in the world. Our work shifting segment is next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Some other stories we're following today. The enterprise software company MicroStrategy saying it plans to offer $400 million in senior secured debt to buy more Bitcoin. It's the first ever junk bond sale used for financing the purchase of the volatile cryptocurrency. The company's CEO and renowned Bitcoin bull, Michael Saylor, said at last week's Bitcoin 2021 event in Miami that he had lost faith in traditional investment strategies. The Indian e-commerce giant Flipkart is said to be in talks to raise $3 billion from investors, including SoftBank. Flipkart, which is controlled by Walmart, is raising the additional capital ahead of an IPO now planned for 2022. The company had targeted going public later this year, but those plans have been delayed due to the resurgence of COVID in India. And a recap of our top story this hour, Apple has given a preview of its new iPhone operating system at its annual Worldwide Developers Conference. It includes new features for iMessage, Photos, the digital wallet, Maps, and notifications. Apple has also announced major new FaceTime tools to rival video conferencing software like Zoom, including the ability to schedule calls and send links for others to join a call. Meantime, the idea of a 15-minute city, a city in which residents live within a short walk or bike ride of all their daily needs, has been embraced by many mayors around the world during the COVID-19 pandemic. But some urban experts warn there are dangers of applying a model conceived in Europe to many North American cities. Joining us now to discuss, Mark Dixon, the CEO of IWG, a flexible workspace provider and rival of WeWork based in Europe. He is the latest guest on our Work Shifting series. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. So talk to us about this concept of a 15-minute city. What's involved in it, and could it really be transported to the United States?
Well, yes, it can definitely be transported. It's very popular already in the United States. I come back to that. First of all, what is it? The 15-minute city, it's really about people wanting to have more of their life more local. And technology now allows that, and the true enemy for many is the daily grind of commuting, and that's what people are looking to avoid. So more of their work activity and more of their leisure activity around where they live. In terms of the United States, we're seeing very strong development of this throughout the United States, with in particular, as the country reopens and as communities reopen, a lot more people want to work locally, either at home or close to home, because they've really appreciated an ability in the past year to spend more time at home or close to home. It's been very valued.
Now, talk to us about what you're seeing in return to work trends. How are you seeing returns, and where are some cities bouncing back more quickly than others, like London, New York, San Francisco, thinking of the big ones?
Yeah, look, it's a return to work that's occurring at different speeds. We're seeing very strong returns and a lot of growth in places like California, with New York lagging. Places like Texas, Florida, very much open, strong levels of growth. So, across the United States, where everything's opening, slightly different paces of recovery. Across the world, it's sporadic in terms of other global cities. London's coming back quite strongly. The rest of the UK's remained strong throughout COVID. Again, the enemy here is commuting. Long commutes are what people are trying to avoid during COVID, but also afterwards. So what we've seen is that those cities worldwide where commuting distances are less and time is less, those cities were much less affected than cities where the commute was long. And that's sort of playing out as the crisis comes to an end.
Now, you did warn that profits would be well below last year, obviously because of the year that we've been in. And I'm curious, you know, how you expect that to play out in your business this year. If 2020 was the year of the pandemic, what is 2021 going to look like for IWG and other flexible work companies?
Yeah, look, here it's, we explain this, it's just pure mathematics. It's not anything more than that. Basically, you had a declining year, very gradual decline in revenues each month during, you know, from April onwards in 2020. We came from our highest performing quarter in our history in the first quarter of 2020. Slow decline since. That decline continued through to April when the business flattened out. So we stopped having a declining occupancy rate in April, and in both May and June, we've got strong levels of occupancy increase and price increase and services coming back as more people are coming back. So we adjusted simply because the pace of recovery, we had expected it to be higher, but because of interruptions in places like India and various other countries, that slowed things down slightly.
All right. Well, thanks so much for giving us a view on these trends as they're playing out around the world. The CEO of IWG, Mark Dixon, appreciate you taking the time to join us. Okay, coming up, Bezos to blast off. We are going to have all the details on the billionaire's plan to take a ride on his Blue Origin spacecraft with his brother next. And AMC continuing to climb up, and away. The stock closing almost 15% higher Monday as most meme stocks also advanced. The SEC saying it's monitoring frenzied trading in the group of shares for any signs of market manipulation. This is Bloomberg. The world's richest person is going into space. Jeff Bezos himself will be one of the passengers next month when his company Blue Origin sends humans into space for the very first time. And he's not going alone. Bezos will be joined by his younger brother and the winner of the online auction the company has been conducting. The suborbital flight is set for July 20th. Joining us with all the details, Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow. So Ed, what do we know? Why did Bezos suddenly decide to make this trip?
Well, he said it was a boyhood dream to go into space. And of course, he has the means to do it. He's been putting about $1 billion almost annually into Blue Origin. This is not some deep space exploration, Emily. He's going up for an 11-minute sojourn into low Earth orbit where the Blue Origin New Shepard craft will carry him up to a point of around 100 kilometers above the Earth's atmosphere, 62 miles. The capsule separates for a few moments, gazing at the stars in low gravity, and then safely, hopefully, comes back down to Earth assisted by parachutes. And as you said, he'll be with his brother, who said it was a dream to bring it with him, and whoever comes out on top in this auction.
So this is then a specific exercise in experiencing weightlessness in space. Talk to us about how it compares to what SpaceX and Virgin Galactic are trying to do with their space tourism efforts.
Yeah, I mean, SpaceX is the greatest comparison because by the end of this year in the fourth quarter, they want to do an actual orbital cruise. You spoke to the Shift 4 Payments CEO earlier this year. He is one of those passengers aboard that planned SpaceX trip that will be a number of days. It won't simply be a launch up and then back down. And then you look at Virgin Galactic. Richard Branson, you know, the billionaire and owner of that, is going to be the first test subject, we believe, sometime this summer. A very different propulsion mechanism carried up by aircraft, separate at high altitude, and then kind of skims along this low Earth orbit trajectory before coming back down safely of its own propulsion. They're very different experiences, but SpaceX certainly has some lead over Blue Origin when it comes to that degree of penetration into space.
Well, and they are competing for much bigger prizes. Where are they in the space race? Who's winning? Because Blue Origin has been around for a long time and only more recently has had much to show for its efforts.
Yeah, it's interesting. Blue Origin has done 15 consecutive tests without a human being. So yes, Jeff Bezos will be the first billionaire in space on paper. But SpaceX has done, for example, 125 launches of the Falcon rocket system. It has the commercial contracts with NASA that Blue Origin lost out on. It was competing with SpaceX to get the lunar landing contract. SpaceX was awarded that in April. Blue Origin has appealed the decision. It really seems like SpaceX is pulling ahead, really deepening that relationship with NASA. And it has the only certified, NASA-certified human spaceflight system. Blue Origin is trailing behind, but you know, this is still a landmark moment for them, and certainly, well, being the first billionaire in space is some accolade.
All right, Ed Ludlow, our resident rocket man, of course. We will be watching that launch on July 20th, carrying Jeff Bezos and his brother, a huge one. Thanks so much, Ed. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tomorrow, we will catch up with California Secretary of the Environment, Jared Blumenfeld. Don't want to miss that one. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.